To say I'm not heavily invested in the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection would be, well, lying. In fact, you could argue that Mega Man might be one of my favorite franchises of all time due to growing up with the Mega Man Anti-Warrior anime. Though I started my weeb days at a young age as I watched it subbed like a 5-year-old badass. So one day, one of my birthdays came up and I really wanted to have a Mega Man game for my birthday. I can't remember which one it was, Mega Man 27 probably? And it just turns out that my dad could not find it in stores. He didn't want to leave empty-handed though, and hands me a GBA box of Mega Man Battle Network, and here we are 20 years later. I'm not going to pretend I am at all surprised that this Legacy Collection is happening. Capcom has been mainly using Mega Man as a port machine rather than the super fighting robot he is after all. And I'm also not going to sit here and tell you to buy this based on just nostalgia alone. This video will be using footage of several of the games, but will remain as spoiler-free as possible, and as a new player of these games, it should be completely safe to watch. The Network Legacy Collection is, like the classic in X1, split into 2 volumes, Volume 1 and Volume 2, each retailing for about $40. The problem, at least to me, is that these are RPGs, not action platformers. The Battle Network series is one long-lasting game series where the narrative takes center stage with incremental upgrades to the overall gameplay systems. A revelation of the first game is relevant to the last game's ending, for example. Having never beaten the first game until way after I finished 6, as I didn't quite go in the intended order back in the day, the ending ended up having me more than a little confused. It's kind of like buying the One Piece manga, but only the parts after the time skip. As I said before, in stark contrast to many of the games that came before it, Battle Network is an RPG like the series has never seen before. Battles take place on a 6x3 grid, with each side starting on a balanced field of 3x3. While battles take place in real time, there is still a turn-based element to it. Each turn, you're able to select BattleChips, powerful moves that you collect as items during the game, starting with 5 of them and increasing in amount based on certain things, which can depend on the game you're playing as well. It's a lot to go into right now, but to focus on the first game, in this one you can decide to wait a turn to have your current selection, plus another 5 on the next turn. This is mainly useful for what's called a program advance. Using this will combine your selected battle chips into one massively stronger chip. Of course, you're not entirely a sitting duck if you're not using the chips or are out of them, as Mega Man is still equipped with his trusty Buster, though it's a lot less formidable than it used to be, as this time around it only deals 1 damage. As the first boss has 300 HP this time around, you'll want to be able to hit him with damaging blows that can deal a little more than that. You do start out with shots that can deal upwards of 40 damage, and every single battle chip you use will replenish after battle. Melee attacks can deal upwards of 80, so you'll likely not be using your Buster that much, but it helps ease the wait time between turns a bit. Unlike most RPGs, power-ups to your characters are bought in stores. There are no level ups, so money can effectively also act as experience points. Your battle chip deck is shuffled randomly at the start of each battle, so you have to create a deck that can adapt to each situation effectively in order to go through battles effectively and consistently. You can only select chips from the same type or chip code, so planning your deck in a way that prevents you from only picking one chip at a time is of course key. Of course, that's only half the story, as being an RPG, you also have to explore locations, and in this RPG, it's not just 1, but 2 worlds. As Mega Man is now a computer program that can explore the net for you, the world is split between Mega Man, who traverses the land of the internet, and Lan, his operator who lives in the real world and can bring Mega Man to different locations. Items like power-ups can be hidden in electronics now as well, like toasters, vending machines, cash registers, so it provides an interesting way to hide items in the real world for Mega Man to use and power up with. Some of these more personal systems, such as your friend's PC, also serve as shortcuts to specific areas in the net, a wide web-like maze that unfortunately does not have a map. And in the first game, you absolutely wish you had one, as nothing here is distinct. In the later games, this thankfully gets remedied a bit, as areas become more recognizable and even start mirroring the real-life counterparts a bit in terms of general layout. The game's stories are generally laid out in a monster of the week formula where an incident will happen, leading to the necessity to explore a computer themed around a certain element, building, concept or otherwise. Fireman in an oven, Colored Man in a traffic light, Elect Man in a power plant, all of which are themed with their own little RPG puzzles, so you'll still get that feeling of exploring in complex dungeons, despite the game's setting being a futuristic city. This formula stays strong in each game with only minor modifications. During dungeon exploration, you'll find yourself having to manage manage your health with in-battle chip usage and out-of-battle sub-chip usage, which more or less just comes down to using potions. Though in the first game, there is no out-of-battle health management, as MegaMan is restored to full health between fights, but the average fight can also be far more threatening, to the point where certain encounters with the many computer viruses can be worse than some of the actual bosses you fight. It's also important to note that these games are Game Boy Advance games, and not a lot was done to make them more presentable in this day and age. So while I personally think that Game Boy Advance games have a lot of charm, and are still very much playable, it might be a bit rough if this is your first rodeo. But let's say you're like me and this isn't your first rodeo. What does the Legacy Collection have to offer for you? First off, for nostalgic nerds such as myself, the main menu is styled like a modern PET, complete with MegaMan Navigator. He's actually voiced by the original Anti-Warrior voice actors for both English and Japanese, and it's just such a treat. It's a very loving homage for people who grew up with the series, and if you don't like them, just like a modern smartphone, you'll be able to mute him and forget he can talk. The technology is amazing. You can check out key art, concept art, rough designs, artwork used for events and merchandise. There's apparently over 1,000 pictures here to view, so I don't know exactly what is included, but that sure is a lot of stuff. BattleChips that were once tied to events are all included in a sub-menu to download them to each game individually. BattleChips, bonus power-ups, side quests, and more that were originally only available with the GBA e-reader are also all available. I'll spare you the history lesson. For these games, they're considered patch cards, and apparently there are 499 of them. Remember that Buster, by the way? A new easy mode has been added called Buster Max Mode, which makes your Buster deal 100 full damage. This is pretty much an insane cheat code, but is amazing for grinding purposes. Remember how each game had that link mode you would never use because no one around you had a link cable and the game to play with? Well, these support online play now. So now you can trade your BattleChips online, compare libraries, and yes, even net battle. Each game will be supported individually, so time will tell if these net battles will all stay alive, but if you want my non-expert opinion, I suspect both 3 and 6 will be played for a long time to come. These include ranked online matchmaking. Unfortunately, these will not be crossplay, so if you want to get in on this, it might be worthwhile checking with online communities to see which version will be considered the main version. As of right now, there is already a competitive scene in existence that hosts tournaments on the original GBA games using emulation, so a PC community is already very likely to exist. These online net battles will support every single way of battling as it was in the original games. So is this game worth buying? Well, yeah. As an existing fan of the series, you were probably sold the moment they said online net battles. As a newcomer, it might feel a little pricey, but 6 games for 60 isn't a bad deal at all, even if they're not as long as your typical RPG. Just make sure any of what I said sounded appealing for you before you buy though. If you like this video and want to listen to more of my voice, I have very different videos for you to watch right here as well. And if you feel like subscribing, that would be absolutely amazing. If you have anything more to add or if I forgot something, please make sure to leave a comment and I will see you next time in a video that will probably be very different from this one. Bye bye!